Where are we going today? YouTube?
Yeah, we're going to YouTube, Twitter slash Periscope, Twitch, D Live, and I believe that's it. Wait, I feel like I've left one out. Facebook, YouTube, Periscope slash Twitter, D Live, and Twitch. Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, cool. Okay. By any chance, are you the one viewing the stream
I was looking at, yeah, what
to
it looked
check?
like on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it was instant. It was actually right at the top of my feed when I opened Twitter.
Nice, 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 nice. Now I wonder whether the echo thing is actually going to translate. Yeah, we've been trying to figure out this whole echo thing. Anyway, okay, cool. Yeah, thank you, James, for making time to actually come on and have this conversation. So this is Catalyst. The idea here is to have a look at the process of this is catalysis, to have a look at the process of catalyst, which is this fund, the community fund, which enables folks all over the world to actually, come along and propose an idea and possibly get funding and just engage with the community and they vote and get funding. Right. So the idea here is to, as we sort of end Fund 2 and begin Fund 3, I thought it'd be nice to just kind of have conversations with folks who, took place in Fund 2 and just sort of get their thoughts of, what the experience was like in Fund 2 and, somewhat sort of give advice for those, coming into the process in Fund 3 and even sort of later funds, right?
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, we'll just jump right into it. And so the structure here is that I've got sort of 10 points or sort of, yeah, 10 points really, that sort of go according to the chronology, so we'll start from challenge and go all the way to sort of like future prospects. And the idea is sort of just quick fire, not more than a minute on each point, right? Cool. All right. So, actually, what would be good if before we even get to this, if you could just give like an elevator pitch about sort of who you are slash within the community.
Yeah, totally. My name is James. I live on the East Coast of the United States. It's been great joining you for some other programming here. It's been a real highlight of the last few weeks. I've spent most of my working career as a high school teacher, the last 5 years as a teacher educator, so out of the classroom, visiting other teachers and helping them grow their craft. And more recently, learning about this Cardano community because the ideas for what, smart contracts and dApps and the host of other things that Cardano is bringing online, I see these tools as having a lot of potential for making a really important impact on a lot of the same problems I was trying to solve in the classroom.
Only now at scale and with incentivization and all sorts of awesome rich tools, right?
New ones every day. That's right.
Exactly. Cool. Awesome. Cool. Thank you very much, James. Right. So let's sort of jump right in. So let's start with the challenge. Like, so what are your thoughts on the challenge and sort of how you interpreted it?
Yeah, and I know like this challenge, you and I have talked about it, and I think it's really easy to find the flaws in it, which there are. And so I'm going to choose to be a strong proponent of this challenge right now. Um, I think I think we had to start somewhere, and this challenge got the conversations going. It was a hard challenge to meet. And so for people who aren't familiar with it, I'll read it right now. It says, how can we encourage developers and entrepreneurs to build dApps and businesses on top of Cardano in the next 6 months? Okay. Right. So if you look at the part about bringing builders into the ecosystem, I'm fully aboard that. We need more people here making things. And what do we want them to build? Heck yeah, we want them to build dApps and businesses. So on both of those counts, I'm good. the part about the next 6 months, it's easy to make a punching bag of that, in part because we're still awaiting certain functionality of Cardano to come out, right? So when Fund 2 launched a few months ago, if you had started counting the 6 months from then, a lot of the ideas that we had, uh, you just can't build them yet. But if we start counting those 6 months from, say, this week as Fund 2 decisions come out, I'm really optimistic that it's going to be possible to achieve this challenge with the tools that we get our hands on over the next 6 months. I do understand that this challenge was limited for bringing in the broadest possible group of different ideas, right? Like, because you had to find a way to show that you were going to build a Dapper business on Cardano. And for example, for more education-based work, that might be challenging to show how that connects.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, well articulated. And I think if I could just sort of highlight a point there, I think in respect to time being associated with a challenge, it's kind of a double-edged sword because you've got you need constraints, but at the same time, when dealing with technology, it's slippery, right? We experienced this in Fund 2 because we set a time to it, and some people made arguably some commercial agreements with external parties,
Mm-hmm.
to a particular timeline, when they thought they would get the money, kind of thing, or the funding, but that ended up sort of not working out because we were not able to get the voting, and again this comes back to code and programming and how um, in developing it is quite unpredictable, and it's really difficult to sort of to keep to schedules, kind of thing. So yeah, time, I think, in respect to the challenges is really something quite interesting for future people, for future proposers to keep in mind, to understand that yeah, just think about time in
Yeah.
general, quite yeah, go on.
That's a really important point because both, right, the Fund 2 took longer than we thought it would take when it started,
Yeah,
right? And for individuals, it's appropriate to be frustrated by that, right? For your individual case. The big picture, however, is that Fund 2 provided the learning opportunity that everybody who's working on Catalyst needed to figure out how it works, right? And that actually ties back to this challenge. As imperfect as the challenge might be, it started the conversations that were necessary to move towards better challenges, right? And so in that sense, it was kind of perfectly worded because it forced all of us to grapple with, how do you make an inclusive challenge? And one thing that Door and the rest of the team at IO recognized is, okay, yeah, we're going to need to have more than one challenge. And so starting a week ago, what we got instead of this one monolithic challenge was two different challenges that address different parts of this one, and then another prompt to come up with our own challenges, right? And I admire that decision so much because, right, like, what's the best way to respond if somebody says that's not the right challenge? It's to say, okay, let's have a contest and write your own, right? And so that's the work that's happening right now. So they figured that part out, and parallel to that, the technical parts were taken care of. This wasn't a case of saying, look, let's have a series of 2-week delays, right? You could choose as an organization to say, look, we might not be able to fit this 6-week cadence. And so maybe Fund 2 is going to balloon from 6 weeks to 8 weeks. And then Fund 3, the same thing will happen. And Fund 4, whatever. And it might be unpredictable. Instead, they chose to pack all of those delays into Fund 2 so that starting now, we have a calendar already published with the start dates for the, what is it, 8 or 9 funds that are going to
9,
launch.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
9 funds this calendar year.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Right. So now the next point number two, ideation. How did you develop the idea?
So I think this is where Catalyst really shined. I actually showed up in Fund One with an idea. I put it up there early in the process. I got feedback on it. I started meeting people, and one of the co-founders and co-proposers for GIMBALABS, which is my Fund Two proposal, her name is Julie Montag. I met Julie during Fund One when she was giving me some awesome critical feedback on my initial proposal. So where the idea originally came from is in thinking about, hey, Maria's here. Hi, Maria. Um, in thinking
Hey.
about what Cardano can do in the world, I realized that one avenue is going to be to focus on kind of towns and cities, right? This is not the answer to all of Cardano adoption, but one element among many of mainstream adoption is going to be paying attention to this part. And so basically my initial proposal was that what can we do locally? How can I apply what I know about teaching to that problem of local adoption? And maybe that'll lead towards building something. So I had the opportunity to refine that idea, get feedback on it, go through the process of Fund One. And then by the time Fund Two started, I already had a proposal that had been through kind of a round or two of revision. And I just wanted to do more of the same. So I took, I looked for other people who might relate to this idea, just tried to have as many conversations as possible. Really kind of found, Roberto, the other co-founder of GimbalAbs. It's awesome how much our projects align, and we're still, still to this day, we're realizing more and more synergies that we couldn't even have hoped for at the beginning of kind of aligning our projects. But I might be getting ahead of myself in the list of items for this episode.
No, 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 no. Actually, the Gimbal Labs formation in looking at the whole list, like this is the best place to actually talk about it. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I had a proposal, about experiential project-based learning and the role that might play and what we were going to build. And that's what I brought to the beginning of Fund Two. I found Roberto's proposal for Dandelion, which the idea is to create API endpoints that make it easy to prototype things using Cardano. And we saw that kind of he was approaching the same problem as I was from a more technical perspective. And I was proposing, the same idea from this kind of learning and doing perspective. And we're already, we've only just started to create starter kits, which were kind of the product at the core of my proposal that incorporate the APIs he's making. And I'm over the moon excited to keep building these things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
So yeah, fun
yeah.
stuff to come.
Yeah, yeah, and the synergies and how that, relates to like local use case as well as proto, and it's just this lovely sort of like, yeah, it's wonderful what and sort of a trusted environment, sort of keen minds can sort of, arrive at, so to speak. Okay, so the next point, point number three, metrics. How did you arrive at your metrics?
Okay, so we all had a lot of ideas for how we were going to show this thing to be successful. And this is why Julie is on this team, because she helped me think about this so much during Fund One. We kept having those conversations throughout Fund One as I would have an idea for, hey, what are we going to measure and what's an appropriate but also exciting goal. She would give me feedback on those, and over time I realized, hey, like this is a core part of accomplishing our mission, is defining success, being able to talk about what that success is. So it really was a collaborative effort to arrive at these final metrics between all three of us. And what we did is we made a couple of simple metrics for the starter kits that are at the core, again, of my part of the original proposal. A couple of simple metrics for the API usage behind Roberto's Dandelion proposal. And then we made a series of GIMBALABS metrics to kind of talk about how, as an organization, we're doing as we launch.
Cool. Could you expand just a little bit in terms of like, say for example, with the starter kit, like, yeah, could you give like a specific example in terms of, okay, like this is a particular thing that we're going to be measuring kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two goals behind a starter kit. One, at a surface level, it's for just any individuals to pick them up, read them, watch the videos that are associated with them, hopefully complete some kind of hands-on project. And that hands-on project might be diving into some code and creating something, or it might be going out into your community, right? So the most recent starter kit, for example, we're just challenging people to go out and spend some ADA in their community, right? Separate from that purpose, we also want starter kits to be something that builders and makers can use to start a business, essentially, right? So one thing I'm working on right now, for example, is a ticketing engine. And what we want to do is be able to show how event venue tickets can be associated with NFTs, for example, on the blockchain. We want to make an open source tool for that anybody can pick up and use. And so that form of starter kit is going to help people learn about what Cardano can do, but it's also going to help developers build something on this blockchain without necessarily having to start from scratch. In turn, if somebody does use that ticketing system, it's also then going to later on fulfill the end user goal, because whatever ticketing app somebody builds is going to end up in the hands of people who have never heard of Cardano, and it's going to make them wonder how we did those things.
Cool. Interesting. Thank you for expanding on that. So shall we move on to number 4, budget? How did you arrive at setting your budget?
All right. So I live in the northeast of the United States, and I've built a life around a teacher salary. And I'll be straight up, a teacher salary here in Massachusetts, United States, is in the range of like 50 to 80K per year, 80,000 US dollars. And so it's a profession that is paid fairly and is certainly not at the top of the pay scale of all the jobs you could have. And so, but it's also, those amounts of money on a global scale are crazy amounts of money, right? So like if you're making 80,000 US dollars in some places, that's an awful lot. So one thing that's interesting about Catalyst is you have to be ready to be part of these open conversations about compensation, and be real and sensitive about, money is worth different things in different places. So when I was alone proposing this, I thought, okay, well, $60,000 divided by 12, that's $5,000 a month. Maybe I can get funded to do this work for 3 months. And so I was kind of hoping for $15,000 to pay what would be my salary for 3 months of full-time work. For 2 reasons, I drew back from that the more we talked about it. One is what I already mentioned, right? Like $5,000 a month, although it's a good living wage here. It's an absurdly high amount of money in some other places, right? So I want to honor that. But the other part is we realized, look, the pool of money in Fund 2 compared to what it's going to be someday is largely symbolic, right? I mean, $250,000 in truth is enough to fund one major venture. And that's not what we want this thing to do. We want this first round of Catalyst to fund as many different projects as possible so we can learn as much as possible. And the benefits to being part of the Catalyst cohort go way beyond just, getting the money from having a proposal funded, right? There's all sorts of support. And so once we were a team of three, Roberto and Julie and me, we kind of talked about, okay, like, look, if our goal is to get funded than to get paid, right? Or more to be part of the cohort receiving support than to get paid, let's just try to, what's the game dynamics behind this? Like, what's an amount of money that feels like it'll be exciting for us to fund our work for a little while, but also low enough to be likely to get through the voting process. So we had those conversations, and as I'm saying all this stuff, I don't actually know how this is coming across, because this is not, we don't usually talk about these things in a public sphere, I guess, so I hope I'm not sounding ridiculous right now.
No, dude, like, you're making so much sense. Like, in my mind, I'm just thinking, like, actually this point is a very important point to perhaps later on create like a graphic which illustrates the point in time that we are in terms of the evolution of Catalyst and Cardano, and even crypto, in whole, having that sort of like contextually put to understand, okay, if a fund is this small, like, what's the optimal amount, and again, like, what's the optimal amount that a project ought to, sort of look for, and the balance between the times that the individuals are sort of giving to the work that they're contributing, as well as how geography actually factors into that, right? Because as you said, like, in Massachusetts, the pay is, quite different, and also just dollars as well, right? Compared to someone else in a different region. In a way, it's kind of similar to the conversations that we've kind of been having about the geographic disparities with stake pool operators, right? And how sort of networking affects that whole dynamic. But yeah, no, that made a whole bunch of sense, and thank you for actually like expanding on that. Okay, so point number 5, I think, communication. How did you go about communication? Like, by this, I mean, yeah, like, in general, like, platform wise, yeah, was there a member on your team who, was specific sort of to this particular element kind of thing? Yeah.
I think we've shared it broadly. Yeah, I think it's worth naming for people who don't know that there are 3 main communication platforms on a daily basis. There's the Ideascale website, right, where proposals go and we can have conversations about these things. There is a thriving Telegram community. There's 800 people on the Telegram channel, I think. Do I have that open right now? Possibly. Yeah, it's I don't want to say the wrong number. Yeah. But there's hundreds of people on a Telegram channel for Catalyst, and there's also a buzzing Discord server for Catalyst which for me helps. I'd rather navigate Discord just because the conversations are broken up into channels, whereas on Telegram there's so much crosstalk,
which is why I hesitate to actually even suggest people go to Telegram. But yeah,
I mean, it gets people in, and what's good is that a few people have really, really stepped up to be shepherds of the Telegram chat, and I can't prove this because I'm not fully caught up on what's going on Telegram. More on that in a minute. But every time I look at Telegram and there's somebody new to the community who has a question, somebody steps up to really help them out. Maria, who was just chatting with us here, Mercy helps out with that. Steve Aldrich has done a lot of help with that. Danny and Umed are all stars, being there for people. Boone and Nick, I'm sure I'm not. The moment you start naming people, you're bound to
Yeah.
forget to somebody.
Forget
So
someone. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know, but like it's really really cool what people are doing on Telegram, and same thing on Discord. Like I think it's safe to say that when new people show up to this community, they find somebody pretty quickly who can kind of meet them with their initial questions and get them involved. And if that's not true, I would love to know. So yeah, I think as a community, we have to know how we're doing, bringing new people aboard. All of that said, I really burnt out on Telegram back in, say, October, just because it's really hard to navigate a chat room and get work done, right? And there were days where choosing to catch up on Telegram was maybe a 90-minute time commitment, right? Because by the time you read through the 600 messages that are there since you last went on, and then you respond to a few people and maybe a conversation starts, so you end up sitting there for a little while. There's that takes a lot of kind of mental horsepower to kind of make sense of all the different ideas that are coming in and try to contribute in a meaningful way. But it's also time away from deep work and really getting done the items on that day's list, right? And this is a dance that we're all going to have to do. And maybe it's just, maybe as a newcomer, the best thing you can do is spend a couple of days prioritizing Telegram, meeting people, having conversations. I didn't pull back from participating for any reason other than I was like, whoa, okay, if I'm actually gonna get stuff done like this, I can't. I don't have time in my week to choose to do this. So I'm wondering as a community how we can maximize kind of people colliding with each other, right, and having those conversations that lead to great outcomes, while also we don't want to burn people out in chat rooms. Like that's not what this community needs to be, right?
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I'm going to be having a conversation with Steve, actually, Aldridge, about this very issue.
Mm.
About sort of governance or sort of moderation and just information overload. But
Mhm.
specifically in the context of Discord, because as you mentioned, Discord it has a superior user experience when it comes to actually creating community, and catching up with ideas, right? Because you have the separate channels, you're able to sort of separate. And whilst I completely agree with the point of like maybe if you're new, like you sort of immersing yourself in an environment, like Telegram is potentially helpful. I think there's also it's a double-edged sword, right? Because there's also maybe the potential of you being overwhelmed, and in terms and time, right? Because time is
Mhm.
super important. So if you're going to spend like that much time, sort of
Mhm.
going through this one linear thing, and it's not in like your mental mapping is not actually sort of being able to be built up in a sort of good, healthy, efficient way. Um, we need to sort of in a way consider that. But anyway, yeah. So let's move on. Communication. So community. How did you go about creating community?
Cool. And thanks for asking this one because it's so related to the communication piece.
Mm,
Um, I think that a lot of the best relationships I've built started actually on idea scale. I think the best way to build community, and one of the best things Catalyst offers, is this chance to focus on the ideas, right? When you're in a chat room, it's too easy to focus on personality. It's too easy to mistake the way somebody says something. There's just so many pitfalls to being in a loud chat room. And on idea scale, what you have the opportunity to do is read somebody's idea at your own pace, respond to it, right? And start a relationship, start a conversation. Um, and I think this, honestly, I know I already said this, but like I think the greatest promise of Catalyst is in people taking each other's ideas seriously, and then being open to seeing where those conversations go, which includes not being not being too wedded to your own idea, right? Being ready to say like, hey, this comment that somebody gave me on my idea makes this idea maybe less mine, but it also takes it to a level that I wouldn't have gotten it to on my own. I'm amazed by the productive discourse in, I would say, probably 85% of the idea scale comments. It'd be interesting to hear other people's estimates of what rate we're at right there, but it does feel like those are really powerful. And if they form collaborations, then that's, I can't think of a better way to start a community than by actually working on something together.
Yeah, interesting.
I'll add, actually, and book club. We started a book club, and that's been also a great way to meet people. Right, everybody has a way they like to connect. That's kind of pseudo work, or a little bit extracurricular, but also related, and that's really changed the way it feels to talk to each other, because you and I know this, like this is right, like we've had a chance to talk about things that are not the immediate work we're doing that day, which only makes it easier to go much deeper into the projects we're working on.
Yeah, and what's interesting, yeah, like just to accentuate that last point, this yeah the community here, it's not just sort of turning up and doing the work. It's turning up and getting to actually form bonds and get to understand people, right? So for example, like before we went live on here, we just spoke about the last book club, and everyone who was on that meeting, there was a sort of a seminal moment because it happened on the 6th, and the book that we're covering, The Sovereign Individual, as well as what was happening at the US Capitol, it was just so so poignant. um and so we all kind of, we're gonna have that moment sort of in our memory, for years to come. And sort of memories associated with other people, sort of they sort of tend to form bonds, kind of thing. And I think that's one of the sort of rich things about.
Oh man, can I say another word about that?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that moment. um I've been a teacher in schools during moments like that, right? I know what it's like to be sharing a space with teenagers and with teacher colleagues when something happens that changes the world, right?
Mm.
I remember watching Obama's inauguration, as a school community, for example. This was the first time I've observed a world event from, in community working remotely. So what are we, 10 months into the pandemic? I haven't had anything near an experience like that. And I assume that most of us who are just home alone trying to get through, our work day, maybe we have some work meetings and more solitude than we wish we had. Seeing something like that might be even more alienating and really hard to watch if you don't have somebody to share it with. And I was just kind of overwhelmed on Wednesday night with gratitude to have been in this kind of like virtual community workspace and get to see this thing happen together. And even though like a lot of us were speechless for a few minutes trying to make sense of it, like Quasar came on waving his hands and we thought he was just being his funny self. And then he
Yeah.
unmuted and told us what was actually happening. And if you take in that news alone, it's gonna hit you one way. But if you have a group to kind of be in awe with, it's a, I don't know what my point is. It's just a better way to experience life, I guess.
You're able to sort of better, in a way, make sense of the world, because it's like, what the hell just happened. And also what's really interesting there is because fundamentally what we're trying to solve here with Catalyst is not just fundraising, but governance, right? And obviously central to governance is communication. So all of these things just sort of like intersect and mingle. And yeah, just something about it, the things which you take for granted, right? So for example, the buildings, that our politicians go and sort of, deliberate in, they symbolically represent something. And, that was part of what was so kind of visceral about this particular experience. Whether or not, whatever side of the political sort of spectrum you reside on, there's something to be said about just that particular moment, and in a way what it represented, and in the context of crypto, what it sort of represents, the opportunity for us to actually realize. Basically, a quick thing on community: you created a GIMBALABS Discord as well, though, right?
We did. Yeah. It's just, I mean, a place to come and talk about these ideas as they start to form. It's a quiet Discord for now, which I kind of like that. we're not trying to overwhelm anybody, but just to be a meeting spot to kind of share ideas. And I think we're going to have, I think we're going to have a lot of fun in there as more tangible things start to come out at Gimbal Labs. And
Yeah.
hey, Josh is here too.
Is he?
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, he says, I've always thought about governance from a political standpoint, right? I know that the physical spaces, that's a good point, eh?
Yeah.
And by the way, for anybody, I mean, we're reading a book that in the mainstream this is a controversial book. If for anybody who's heard of it, it was published in the mid to late 90s. And it's controversial. It's troubling for some reasons, but it's also a well-reasoned argument that is worth grappling with, even though it's a book that absolutely makes people uncomfortable. And that's one of the things we were talking about before the conversation shifted to the day's events. But it was, I mean, the cosmic alignment of reading this book and seeing that news at the same time. I mean, essentially, for anybody who knows nothing about this book, it predicts basically what was happening on Wednesday. So yeah, a lot to take in.
Yeah, I feel like you've left out the third leg of the stool there, which is the book, and what it's about, what happened then, and being part of Catalyst, which is fundamentally. So that sort of triangle is, yeah, the cosmic alignment, like, again, forever sort of inseared, I think, in our brains.
And I don't think it's overblown to say that as cynical as Wednesday's events might lead somebody to be, right? And I think left or right or center, Wednesday left you cynical. Catalyst is the counterbalance to that, right? It's a place where, independent of your politics, you can come to actually grapple with these problems instead of yelling at somebody else about them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So number 7, resources. Any resources that you'd recommend?
In order to prepare to like a catalyst proposal.
Yeah, or even just, yeah, resources which during your time in Fund 2 that you found to be particularly helpful.
Um,
Because, okay, I'll give
yeah,
an example. Like for
yeah.
instance, I find Y Combinator and the awesome videos that they have. I mean, I've watched them. I'm someone who's sort of been following tech for, I don't know, the last decade or so. Um, the sort of the startup scene, and Y Combinator has been quite a sort of a presence there, and they've made a whole bunch of videos which really sort of talk to the nature of the startup, right? Having an idea and then sort of developing it, and all the stuff that kind of goes with it. So from like founder disagreements and how to best sort of approach the team formation, etc., all the way to breaking down the money, figuring out how to fundraise, thinking about how to approach localization, different geographies. So like for me, Y Combinator is a really good resource in that regard. So
Yo, thanks for that. Actually, I've had them in the back of my mind as a reference point for this work, and I like Paul Graham's blog has been absolutely essential to me forever.
yeah.
Um, so I could probably point to a few of his posts that I read 10 years ago that have been really helpful only now.
Oh
But
no.
I forgot about Y Combinator's resources, and you're making me want to go through those. Honestly, for me, the problem with this question is I I I try to just take in a lot of information and synthesize it without remembering where it came from. So there's so many books that are that support this work. Yeah, I have to get back to you on which ones have been the most relevant.
Okay.
But you know what? But this idea of time, right? Like Paul Graham really does write effectively about time and having a mental model of, hey, this is the time that I'm going to go on Telegram and Discord versus this is the time I'm going to spend with, the Wi-Fi off and just working on something. Everybody needs to be good at that, right? And successful people are, and I would recommend everybody find their own mechanism for making a distinction between those times, because like a fast route to just imbalance in life is not being able to make that distinction, right? But as long as you know what your time is for, you can use it better.
Yeah, time management basically. Yeah, and yeah,
Yeah,
so
so whatever
yeah,
tools help with that.
yeah. PaulGraham.com is the website. It's styled like something that from that's from the 1990s or something,
It's
but it
it's the
is really
calmest
rich.
website. Yeah, there's no calmer place on the internet than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and actually, just a quick aside, like there's one that I remember to this day, which speaks about Google and Yahoo, and just a whole like early like search engine, and that whole journey, and it's really fascinating. I mean, like you can point to any of his blog entries, they're really rich. And another person actually in line with that, I would say, is Sam Altman. Sam
Nice. Yep.
Altman, he's like on the same level for me. Yeah,
So we'll just await Dora's blog when Catalyst gets to the level of Y Combinator. Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so number eight, practices. So, are there any best practices that you arrived at throughout your process of of being a part of Fund Two? That
Yeah.
perhaps in the beginning you didn't sort of have, but then as you sort of went through it, you then sort of developed.
Um, yes, I mean, obviously time management. And the other thing I mentioned earlier to reiterate now is just don't hold your ideas too dear, no matter what, right? No matter how good you think your ideas are, somebody might have a good insight, and open-mindedness to those other insights is just absolutely critical, right? You can't make the most of this system without being willing to hear what people think and to revise your thinking. So that's probably the number one most important practice, right? And the flip side of that is just putting yourself out there to try to give your own feedback on other people's ideas and see how that pushes your own thinking, see how that pushes their thinking, look for where that synergy is going to be, and what kind of surprising insights might come out of that. Um, in terms of practices I've developed over the course of this, it's everything here has been a really important reminder that just doing a little bit every day is so much better than trying to cram, So I would say that addressing a problem, like digging in deep to the problem of the day, and then letting it be, is so important. So yeah, I think in my answer to this eighth prompt, I've only provided the normal platitudes of productivity, but they all do apply here.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I do not concur. I think actually the point that you brought up about which is basically IP, right? Intellectual property. You know, thinking, okay, no, this is my idea, and like it has to remain this way. As opposed to actually being open to the open source nature and the collaborative nature to which ideas will really and have flourished. A case in point, GIMBALABS, right? You guys have been actually open to collaborating and just like blending, creating like this transformer of a proposal, made up of these, three axes. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, IP, time management, and just get stuck in basically because yeah, it's important to do that because when it comes to ideas, there's a vulnerability to it. So just in a way, be cognizant of that, as you're doing so, and in a way, be a good community member, in how you give feedback. Give
Yeah.
feedback in the way that you'd like to receive feedback.
The word stewardship comes to mind too,
Yeah,
right? Be a good steward of yours and others' ideas and the safe intellectual space.
exactly, precisely. Okay, right. Number 9, perspective. Now, looking back, what what would you wish you knew at the beginning of Fund 2?
Uh, well, no. So what I really want to say right now
Yeah.
is honestly nothing. There's 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 no like edge or insight that I would wish to have then that I now have because this is about the process, right? Like if there were any shortcuts to knowing those things, then we wouldn't need this process, right? So I mean, I could say that I wish I knew Roberto or I wish I knew you right at the beginning of the fund, so that we could collaborate on an even better proposal from day one and go through this process. But it's a 6-week cycle now, right? Like so, we can do that eventually. Um, I guess a cheap answer to that question is, yeah, I wish I knew it wasn't going to be 6 weeks, and so I wish I knew it was going to be whatever, 3 months.
Yeah.
But even that, even being in community and coming to terms with, oh, like this, right, it's hard to build something revolutionary. Like that's a really nice insight to meet face to face with and to have other people to argue with about it and to talk it through. So I I hope it doesn't come across as like dodging the question, but like I really wouldn't change anything. Uh,
Yeah.
is that
I mean,
fair?
what? Well, yeah, it is. What you did, you did say it, in saying like you wish you knew that it would be 3 months and not 6 weeks. Um, yeah, which is actually a fair point. And again, this comes back to what we've spoken about earlier, which is time. Like time keeps coming
Mhm,
up a whole bunch of times here,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Understanding that in some respects, time is sort of frozen, and in some respects, it's thawed, and quite sort of malleable, sort of dynamic. So yeah, time.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. Right, so now, last but not least, this conversation was supposed to actually just take place over 10 minutes, and here we are, close to an hour. But I think it's been it's been really valuable.
Guilty as charged.
I mean, this tends to happen whenever we have a conversation. Um, we ought to factor that in next time. Okay,
I don't
so
know. I don't know if Josh is still listening, but he can relate too. We, you lose that time, but it's not lost. It's all valuable. So
indeed.
we damn well better do something with all these conversations, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we already are, and I think we're gonna
I
do
know.
even a lot more. And even for people who are gonna come, come along, in Fund 4, 5, etc. These early learnings I think are really sort of important, not only to sort of show the progress that we have had from the very first fund to wherever we're gonna be then, but also these core problems, I think will carry on being relevant, right? Understanding time, right? The structure of Catalyst or Idea Scale might improve and factor this in, but some things are still on the person, on the person's end, right? Things like, okay, how do you best engage the community? How do you best create a rapport? Um, and so on and so forth. Right. So number
Beautiful.
10, coming in at number 10, prospects. What lasting difference do you hope to have made looking back? I don't know, like a year, maybe 2 or 3.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, from the very beginning of Fund Two, and even going back to Fund One, it felt as a proposer like, of course, we're trying to get our idea. We're trying to get a project funded. It would be incredible to be part of a cohort of doers and makers and builders. But everybody, every step of the way, has a responsibility towards helping to define what this thing is in the first place. So I really, really hope that whether successful or not, right? Like whether GimbaLabs succeeds as a self-sustaining project is one variable that's completely independent to whether or not it can contribute back to showing what a Catalyst project can be, right? And it would be great to maximize both. It would be great for us to build a sustainable business while also being a model of what Catalyst can kickstart. But listen, like there's a dozen reasons why GimbaLabs might not work out or might become something that we didn't expect or whatever. And even if that happens, we have a responsibility and a privilege and an ability to help show, hey, when you are in the proposal phase of Catalyst, here's how you can contribute to being part of this. Here's how you can listen. Here's how you can ask people good questions. I really, really hope to have been an example of that so far, and also to get to kind of continue to demonstrate that. And actually, you know what? I'm kind of
Hmm.
I'm being optimistic and really hoping that GimbaLabs is funded, even if it's not funded. Right? We have this responsibility to to be to be grateful for what we've already gotten. Right? Like I in so many ways, we've already been successful because we've built a team and we've started to have some partnerships. Um, so yeah, even if not funded, there's such an important role to play in being present for making Catalyst what it can be.
Such a great point to leave it on, because like I mirror your sentiment in that regard, in that um one thing that I've sort of been trying to communicate to folks is, when you come on to Catalyst Idea Scale, think of realize that majority of startups fail, right? So it's like
Mm.
99% perspiration, 1% inspiration, right? So your idea is that 1%. Probability is sort of works against you in terms of you being, say, the one who actually succeeds in terms of realizing this specific idea. So, and what's great about this is, because of this open source way that we are working, if you fail, someone else can then come along and attempt, a different sort of execution model, or multiple people. right? Because at the end of the day, it's about the idea and the value that it then brings back to the community, um, as opposed to being, this kind of egotistic, proprietary, my idea, sort of closed-minded environment. Because again, a rising tide raises all boats. I feel like you're going to say something.
Nope, that's it. I'm
Okay.
grateful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, James from GIMBALABS.
Hey, thank you for another great 10-minute conversation. I loved it.
Cool. Okay, so actually, man, there's still a whole bunch of stuff that I would have liked to have said, but we'll save it for later date. Yeah, thank you very much, James, for your time. I'll just move this over here so I can actually be able to finish it. Yeah, and so for those actually catching this, we do this frequently. I'm going to be having more folks. If you're part of Fund 2, and you want to sort of come on and give your hindsight feedback, just reach out. I'm sort of quite available. I'm on Discord, or you can even just DM the Catalyst, the cast Twitter account. The DMs are open there. Yeah, because I think it's super important to just add this whilst it's still fresh in your mind, and preferably before we find out who's funded and who's not, because that will then change the dynamic.
Yeah.
If you can just come forward. I'm going to be having a similar conversation with Tevo soon, and yeah, so yeah, others, if you want to reach out. Let's actually have this conversation. Let's try and in a way think of the spirit of decentralization and what it means to share our learnings, and how much value that's going to be for guys coming on Fund 3 and future funds. With that said, thank you very much for your time, and yeah, hope to see you around. Cheers.